If he finds out the truth, I'm finished. Riley adjusted her dress in the mirror, smoothing out the silky fabric that clung to her curves like a second skin. The dim lighting of the upscale hotel suite cast a golden hue on her bronzed complexion, making her look like a woman who belonged in this world, one of power, wealth, and untouchable luxury, but she didn't belong here. Not really. The truth was, she had crawled her way out of the gutter, shedding her past like a snake's skin. A past filled with mistakes, reckless choices, and the 2 children she had given birth to from men who had walked away without looking back. Now, standing in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city skyline, she reminded herself of the goal: Damien Wolfe, a billionaire, ruthless in business and love. A man who never let women close enough to see his weaknesses. A man who would never, under any circumstances, get involved with a woman who had baggage, which is why Riley had erased every trace of her old self. She had spent months crafting this version of herself, elegant, charming, irresistible. A woman with no past, no struggles, and certainly no children. Tonight, she would complete the seduction. She had lured Damien this far, but now came the final step, getting him into bed. And once that happened, she would ensure that he couldn't let her go, as she poured herself a glass of champagne. There was a knock at the door. Her heart pounded, but she took a slow breath, smoothing out any remaining nerves. She opened it. Damien stood there, towering, intense, and utterly devastating. His sharp blue eyes flickered with intrigue as he stepped inside. "You look stunning," he murmured. Riley smiled, stepping closer. "And you, Mr. Wolfe, look like a man who could use a distraction." As she reached for his tie, her mind screamed, "Don't mess this up. This is your only chance." But what she didn't know was that this night would change everything. Riley wasn't always this woman, polished, refined, controlled. In her early 20s, she was reckless, rebellious, and desperate for love in all the wrong places. She had slept with men who only wanted one thing, convinced herself they cared, and ignored every red flag. She had gotten pregnant at 21 for a nightclub owner who vanished the moment she told him. At 23, it happened again, this time, with a street hustler who promised her the world but left her the moment things got difficult. By the time she turned 25, she had 2 sons, an eviction notice, and a reputation that ensured no man would take her seriously. Life had broken her. But she refused to stay broken. She cut off bad influences, changed her entire appearance, and taught herself how to move among the wealthy. Now, at 29, she had a real estate business, not wildly successful, but enough to survive. But surviving wasn't enough. She wanted security, wealth, and a man who could give her the life she deserved, and that's where Damien Wolfe came in. She met him at an elite gala, pretending to be a luxury property consultant. He had been intrigued, drawn in by her mystery and confidence. And she had played the role perfectly, letting him believe she was a woman with no strings attached. But if he ever found out about her past, he'd walk away without a second thought, and she couldn't afford to let that happen. As the night progressed, Riley executed her plan flawlessly. She and Damien drank, laughed, exchanged charged glances. She made sure to be irresistible but slightly out of reach, enough to make him chase. When his lips finally crashed against hers, she knew she had won. As they stumbled toward the bedroom, tangled in passion, her heart raced for an entirely different reason. This was it. The moment that would change everything, but Riley had no idea that Damien wasn't as clueless as she thought. He had secrets too. And soon, both their worlds would collide in ways neither of them saw coming. Riley woke up in Damien's penthouse, bathed in the golden glow of sunrise. The sheets smelled of his cologne, masculine, rich, and intoxicating. The night had gone perfectly. She had sealed the deal, ensuring that Damien would crave her even more. She stretched, allowing a smug smile to spread across her lips. Step 1, complete. Now, I just need to make him fall hard enough that he won't leave me when the truth comes out. She turned over, expecting to find Damien asleep beside her, but the bed was empty. Her heart skipped. Where was he? Then, she heard his voice, calm, controlled, but firm. And he wasn't alone. Riley's stomach twisted as she grabbed his silk robe and padded quietly toward the hallway. She peered around the corner and saw Damien standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, speaking into his phone. His back was to her, his posture tense. "Find out everything about her," he said. Riley's breath hitched, her pulse pounded so hard she could barely hear the rest of his conversation. "I don't care how clean she looks. Everyone has a past. I want her background, her family, every man she's ever been with. I need to know what she's hiding." Riley's blood ran cold. He was investigating her. She backed away slowly, trying to steady her breathing. "He doesn't know yet. He just suspects something. I still have time." But time was running out faster than she realized. By the time Damien ended his call, Riley had already composed herself. She leaned against the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll through her phone as if she hadn't heard a thing. He walked in, looking effortlessly powerful in his fitted white dress shirt and dark slacks. His piercing blue eyes locked onto her, unreadable. "Morning," she purred, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "You left me all alone." Damien smirked. "You seemed exhausted after last night. Thought I'd let you rest." She forced a chuckle. "How thoughtful. Play it cool, Riley. He doesn't know anything yet." She turned to face him, her expression playful. "So, Mr. Wolf, was last night a one-time thing, or are you planning to keep me around?" Damien studied her, his gaze sharp. "That depends." "On what?" she asked, tilting her head. "On whether or not you're as perfect as you seem." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. He knows something is off. She needed to tighten her grip on him before he uncovered the truth, so she did the only thing she knew best. She walked over, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, "Why don't you let me prove that I'm exactly what you need?" She kissed him, pouring every ounce of her manipulation into that kiss, and it worked. Damien deepened the kiss, hooked, but not yet fooled. For the next few weeks, Riley played the role of the perfect woman. She spent every moment by Damien's side, attending business dinners, lounging in his penthouse, seducing him at every turn. She spoke his language, understood his world, and never let him see the cracks beneath the surface. But Damien wasn't an easy man to fool. He studied her, watched her closely, and one evening, he finally caught the first crack in her perfect facade. They were having dinner at a 5-star restaurant, sipping wine, when Damien casually asked, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Riley smiled. "Hopefully, by your side." He raised an eyebrow. "No career goals? Family plans?" Riley's stomach twisted. "Family," she sipped her wine, keeping her expression neutral. "I like to live in the moment. Planning too far ahead ruins the excitement of life." Damien didn't respond right away. He just watched her, as if analyzing her every word. Finally, he leaned back. "Interesting." Riley felt a bead of sweat form on her neck. Had she said something wrong? And then, the worst thing happened. Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression unreadable, but Riley caught a glimpse of the name. His private investigator. A chill ran down her spine. Was this it? Had he found out about her past? She held her breath as he stood. "I need to take this." Riley nodded, forcing herself to smile. Of course. But inside, she was terrified, because if Damien knew the truth, her perfect world was about to shatter. Riley sat frozen in her chair as Damien stepped away to answer his call. The dim candlelight flickered against her wine glass, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced. What if the investigator told him everything? What if he already knows? Her stomach churned. 2 children. 2 different fathers. A past full of reckless decisions. She couldn't let this slip away. Not after everything she had sacrificed. She forced herself to breathe and listen. Damien stood a few feet away, his voice low but firm. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone unreadable. A pause. Then, "Keep digging." Riley clenched her fists under the table. "He doesn't know everything." Not yet. When Damien returned, his expression was normal. But his eyes had changed, colder, more calculating. Sorry about that, he said, sitting down. Business, Riley forced a smile. Of course. Everything okay, he nodded, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. For now, she lifted her wine glass, keeping her hand steady. I need to stay ahead of him. If he finds out too much, it's over. Riley knew she had to be more careful. For the next few days, she played her role perfectly, seductive, supportive, and utterly enchanting. Damien was drawn to her like never before, but she could feel something different in his touch, a hesitation. A doubt. Then, one afternoon, she made her first mistake. She had left Damien's penthouse to visit her best friend, Vanessa, who was the only person who knew the full truth. She never brought her children to the city. They lived in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts, where no one from her new life would ever see them. But that day, she let her guard down. She sat at Vanessa's apartment, holding her youngest son, Jace, in her lap. He giggled, playing with the gold bracelet on her wrist. You're getting too big for me to carry, she teased, kissing his curly hair. Mommy, Jace whined, clinging to her. Mommy loves you, she whispered. A sudden knock at the door made her heart stop. Vanessa frowned. You expecting someone? Riley shook her head, her pulse racing. Vanessa peeked through the peephole, then turned back, her face pale. It's Damien. Riley's world tilted. For a split second, Riley couldn't breathe. Then, instincts kicked in. She handed Jace to Vanessa. Take him to the bedroom. Now, Vanessa grabbed the boy and disappeared just as Riley smoothed her dress, wiped her hands, and opened the door. Damien stood there, towering, his sharp blue eyes scanning her. Hey, she said, flashing a smile. What are you doing here? He didn't smile back. I was in the area and thought I'd surprise you. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her just enough so he couldn't see inside. Her heart pounded. Had he heard Jace? Damien leaned against the doorframe, watching her too closely. You never told me you had friends here. Riley laughed lightly. There are a lot of things I haven't told you yet. She trailed a finger down his arm. I like keeping things mysterious. His jaw tensed. Mysterious? Her. For a second, Riley thought he was about to push past her and step inside. Her stomach twisted, then, he exhaled, glancing at his watch. I have a dinner meeting. I'll see you tonight. She forced a playful pout. Leaving so soon? He smirked, kissing her lightly. For now, Riley stayed frozen as he walked away, every muscle in her body tense. The moment he was gone, she darted back inside. Vanessa was already pulling Jace's shoes on. You need to be more careful, Vanessa hissed. Riley swallowed hard. She knew. But it was getting harder to keep everything hidden. That night, Riley met Damien at his penthouse. She had been careful, more charming than usual, more attentive, ensuring he was completely under her spell, but something felt different. As they lay in bed after an intense night, Damien ran his fingers down her arm, his expression unreadable. Riley, he murmured, what do you want from me? She blinked, forcing a soft smile. What do you mean? His grip tightened slightly. You're beautiful, charming, and you appeared in my life out of nowhere. But I know when someone is hiding something. Her breath hitched. Did he know? He studied her. You have a past, don't you? Her pulse pounded. Everyone does, Damien smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's true. But the question is, how much of yours are you lying about? She felt the trap closing in, but before she could answer, Damien reached into his bedside drawer and pulled out a file. He tossed it on the bed. Go ahead, he said. Open it. Riley's hands shook as she flipped it open, and her heart stopped. Inside were photos of her with Jace and her other son, a copy of Jace's birth certificate. A record of both fathers who had left her, her entire past. Laid out before her, she looked up, her blood running cold. Damien's expression was unreadable, but his voice was dangerously soft. You lied to me, Riley. Riley's throat went dry. The weight of the folder in her hands felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. Damien didn't speak. He simply watched her, his piercing blue eyes studying every flicker of emotion on her face. She knew there was no point in denying it. Her lies had crumbled, but she wasn't the type to surrender easily. She swallowed and lifted her chin. "So, you've been spying on me?" Damien let out a slow, humorless chuckle. "You really have the nerve to flip this on me?" He leaned closer, his voice dangerously low. "I had to spy on you, Riley. Because you never told me the truth." Riley's heart pounded. She had to think fast. "I was going to tell you," she lied smoothly. "I just didn't know how," Damien scoffed, his jaw tightening. "When? Before or after you had me wrapped around your finger?" "Damien, please," she whispered, reaching for his hand. "I never wanted to lie to you." He pulled away, his expression unreadable. Then he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. For a long moment, he said nothing. That silence scared Riley more than if he had yelled at her. Then, without turning around, he finally spoke. "Get out." Riley's breath caught in her throat. "Damien," I said, "get out." His voice was cold, final. Panic clawed at her chest. No, I can't lose him. Not now." But she knew she had no choice. With a lump in her throat, Riley grabbed her purse and walked to the door. Just before she stepped out, she turned back. "You don't know everything," she whispered. Damien still didn't look at her. She walked out, not knowing if she had just lost everything, or if she still had one last chance. Riley sat in Vanessa's apartment, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. "This is bad," Vanessa muttered. "Really bad," Riley groaned, running her hands through her hair. "I know that, Vanessa. But I can't just give up. Damien is the best thing that's ever happened to me," Vanessa sighed. "You don't love him, Riley. You love what he can give you." Riley hesitated. Did she? She wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was that losing Damien meant losing everything she had fought for. "I need to fix this," she said firmly. Vanessa gave her a skeptical look. "How?" "He threw you out. He probably hates you." Riley's eyes darkened with determination. "Then I'll make him need me again." Vanessa shook her head. "Riley, this is dangerous. If Damien feels betrayed, he could destroy you." But Riley wasn't listening anymore. She had a new plan, and this time, she wouldn't fail. A week passed. Damien hadn't called. Riley knew better than to beg. Instead, she did something unexpected. She disappeared. No texts. No calls. No attempts to fix things, and just as she had hoped. Damien noticed. At first, he told himself he didn't care. Riley had lied to him. She had manipulated him, but something about her disappearance unsettled him. One night, after a long day at work, he found himself checking his phone, expecting a message from her. Nothing. He scrolled through his contacts, hesitating over her name. Why am I even thinking about her? Frustrated, he tossed his phone on the table. Then, 2 days later, he saw her at a charity gala. She looked stunning, too stunning. Her deep red dress clung to her body, her hair cascaded down in soft waves, and her smile was effortless. And worst of all, she wasn't alone. A tall, powerful-looking man stood beside her, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh. Damien's blood boiled. He clenched his fists as jealousy surged through him. Had she moved on already? He wasn't sure why, but something in him snapped. Before he knew it, he was walking toward her. Riley turned, and for a brief second, pure victory flashed in her eyes. But she masked it quickly, giving him a surprised smile. "Damien. Fancy seeing you here." Damien's jaw clenched. "Can we talk?" She glanced at the man beside her. "I'm kind of busy," his patience snapped. "Now, Riley." Riley bit her lip, as if debating, then finally nodded. "Excuse me for a moment," she told the man. Damien pulled her aside, gripping her wrist tightly. "You've been avoiding me," he growled. She gave him an innocent look. "I thought that's what you wanted." Damien narrowed his eyes. "What game are you playing?" Riley leaned in, her voice soft and teasing. "Who says I'm playing?" Damien's heartbeat quickened. She was doing it again, getting under his skin. He hated it, he craved it. "You lied to me, Riley," she sighed. "I did. But did you ever stop to think why?" He glared at her. Because you wanted my money, she smirked. That's what you think of me? Damien didn't answer. He was confused, angry, intrigued, jealous, all at once. Then, before he could stop himself, he grabbed her waist and pulled her against him. You drive me crazy, he muttered. Riley tilted her head, her lips inches from his. Good, then she kissed him, and just like that, she was back in the game. The kiss was supposed to be just another move in her strategy. But when Damien's lips crashed against hers, something felt different. This wasn't just a game anymore, it was dangerous. Damien pushed her against the wall, his hands gripping her waist tightly. You're still a liar, he murmured against her lips. Riley smirked. And you still want me? His grip tightened. That's the problem. She ran her fingers through his hair, her voice softer now. Then don't fight it, Damien exhaled sharply. I don't trust you. Riley looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she felt something unexpected, guilt. She had lied. She had manipulated. But deep down, she knew something real had grown between them. I don't want your money, Damien, she whispered. He searched her face. Then what do you want? Riley hesitated, and for the first time, she didn't know the answer. Damien shouldn't have given in. He knew Riley was dangerous, manipulative, secretive. And yet, as she stood before him, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her, he couldn't push her away. They spent the night together. But this time, it wasn't about lust. It was something deeper, something neither of them wanted to admit. When morning came, Damien woke up first. He turned to see Riley sleeping peacefully beside him, her face relaxed, almost innocent. For a moment, he let himself believe it was real, but then he remembered the lies, the secrets, the betrayal. Damien quietly got out of bed, his mind racing. He needed to know the full truth, and this time, he wasn't going to stop until he had it. By noon, Damien had called in his private investigator again. I need everything. Not just her past, but what she's doing now. Who she's talking to. Who she's meeting. The investigator nodded. I'll have something for you soon. Damien sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. He had always prided himself on control, on seeing through people's facades, so why did Riley get past his defenses? And why, despite everything, did he still want her? The report arrived 2 days later. Damien read every word, and by the time he was done, his hands were shaking with rage. Riley hadn't just lied about her past, she had 2 children. 2 boys, one from each of the men who had abandoned her. She had kept them hidden, living in a separate apartment outside of the luxury life she had built with him, and the worst part. She had been funneling money from him to care for them. Damien clenched his jaw. He had been used. Again, but this time, he wasn't going to let it slide. Riley was at a spa when she got the call. Damien wants to see you. Now, her heart pounded. She could hear the edge in his assistant's voice. Something was wrong. When she arrived at his penthouse, the atmosphere was ice cold. Damien was waiting for her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Sit, he ordered. Riley hesitated but obeyed. Then he threw the folder on the table in front of her. Open it. Her fingers trembled as she did. Her entire life, her secrets, her children, was laid out in front of her. You knew, she whispered. Damien's voice was like steel. I know everything. Silence. Then Riley sighed, her shoulders dropping. I was going to tell you. Damien slammed his fist on the table. Stop lying. Riley flinched. Did you ever love me, Riley? Or was I just another rich fool to take advantage of? Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to cry. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did, he said coldly. Silence stretched between them, then Damien spoke again. I don't care what your past was. I don't even care that you have children. What I can't forgive is that you never trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Riley swallowed hard. So, what happens now? Damien stood up. You leave. Her heart sank. Damien, it's over. Riley, this time, she knew he meant it. She had lost him. Riley left Damien's penthouse, her mind numb. She had fought so hard to build a new life, to escape the mistakes of her past, and now, it was all gone. She went home to her small apartment, where her 2 boys were waiting. She hugged them tightly, tears finally spilling down her face. She had tried so hard to erase her past, to pretend she was someone else, but in the end, her past had caught up with her. Weeks passed. Damien tried to move on, but he couldn't shake the ghost of Riley from his mind. One evening, he found himself driving past her apartment. Through the window, he saw her with her sons. She was laughing. A real laugh, and for the first time, he saw her as more than just a woman who had deceived him. She was a mother. A survivor, maybe even someone he could still love. He wasn't sure what he would do next, but as he drove away, he knew one thing: this wasn't the end of their story. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something real.
Please subscribe, like, comment and share this video. It means a lot to us. Thank you.